Hi everyone and welcome. It was really nice getting together today to explore for the second time mindfulness and the ways in which we can cultivate greater mindful awareness and attentiveness to the nature of this mind and how it wanders, where it wanders to, the qualities of moment-to-moment experience as they relate to the thoughts, the feelings, or the sensations that are continuously arising in the mind and body, and the ways that they can be a source of insight and inspiration, and also can be a form that's more reactive and defensive and contracted, and how the mindfulness practice can help us discern between these two. What I'd like to do is take a few moments and just briefly recap what it is that we covered today, to both remind ourselves of the essence and the heart of some of the fundamental mindfulness insights, the various practices that we explored or learned, even for the first time, perhaps some of them, and then the takeaway, what it is that we're to do if we choose to help to deepen our foundation of practice, so that when we meet again in 2 weeks, we're able to move things to the next level. Today was all about focus and concentration and practices to help us both deepen our capacity to be focused and attentive, but also to notice the mind as it begins to move away from the object on which we place it. Because it is not so much about being focused and attentive and concentrative as much as it is about being aware of the ways in which we're losing a connection to the object of our attention. And it is that moving away from the object and how the practice of mindfulness can help us be more exquisitely attuned to that movement of the mind, where perhaps the greatest opportunity resides. And so we talked about the nature of this mind that wanders, and the various exercises we did. We commented on the ways in which we noticed our mind wandering, and this is a reminder that the mind wanders quite a lot, that when it does wander, we're oftentimes not aware that it's wandering, that when it wanders unaware, our mood tends to drop, and that we can at any time, with an awareness that the mind has wandered, through that waking up, do something, like bring our attention back to the object on which we've placed it. Now we'll learn next week how we don't have to come back to somewhere as if we actually left there in the first place. We can attend to the place that our mind has moved to, aware and attentive. But here we are cultivating focus and concentration, and so when we notice our mind wandering, we bring our attention back to the breath or the body. And so we did that today, and we remembered the nature of this mind that wanders with an okayness, that that's the nature of the mind. And we're here to develop more skillful ways of noticing and working with the mind that wanders, and the ways it can lead to emotional reactivity and becoming scattered and distracted and all of that we're very interested in this life that we're living, in this work that we're doing. We also did a series of practices. We began with the counting practice, which was to bring our attention to the breath, and on each exhalation, note to ourselves the count from 1 to 10. And among the various reasons we did this, we noticed that, like when we practice music and practice the scales on the piano or on a cello or whatever it may be, that we have the opportunity to see, can we get to 10? What happens along the way? Sometimes we get to 2 and we're off because the mind is so busy, and off we go, not even aware that we went off. Or we're aware of making our way to 10 and we're aware of thoughts arising along the way. Or we seem to be very attentive and focused on the breath or the count, and we get to 10. Whatever form it takes, that very short beginning to a practice or practice unto itself can be informative in understanding the nature of the mind in that moment. After practicing the counting method, if you will, we then did a traditional mindfulness practice where we brought our attention to the breath or to the body, resting our attention there as the primary object, and when we notice the mind wandering, gently bringing our attention back. That's something that we explored last week. That's something we brought in this week. And it is a fundamental mindfulness practice. It may be the bedrock of your practice so far. We also looked at the landscape of the mind, this diagram, this illustration, and we noticed, where is it that we find our mind going? the valley of fear, the river of regret, frustration, in the weeds, wherever it is that we might notice that the mind goes from time to time. And like the attractive nuisance, we're drawn to it, even though it's not necessarily in our best interest. In the bigger sense of a mindfulness practice, there might be something to learn from the places that we tend to go to, that we ruminate on in the past, or that we're so focused on in the future that may or may not ever happen, that's a source of worry or anxiety. But for now, let us just know that not only does the mind wander, but to become familiar with, more aware of the places it wanders to, so that when it goes there, tomorrow and the next day and the next day, rather than be lost in the landscape of the mind, we go, ah, there I go, there's jealousy, jealousy is arising. There's anger, anger is arising. There's fear, fear is arising. Because as was commented on today, aware of where we're going, aware of what we're caught in, can very much change that experience. We also did a practice known as the Just Is Homes, to stop, look, and listen. And this was a practice that was intended to both, with its name, Just Is Homes, justice, to remind us that mindfulness is very much a practice of allowing this moment to be this moment. Not acquiescing to the next moment, but this moment, to allow it to be as it just is. And to the extent that we can do that, that is to take reality as it comes, not making it into more than it is, not making it into less than it is, we might actually be able to really bring about the full measure of what we have to offer, and do so from a place of balance and equipoise. And so that practice, the stop, look, and listen, invites us to stop, pause, as we breathe, to look and notice the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that are arising in that moment, just checking in. It can take all of a few moments. There's activity of the mind, busy or not so busy. There's a feeling tone of this moment. I'm caught in anger or frustration or worry or excitement. And there's an engagement in the body. And noticing those three pieces. And we talked a lot about those three pieces. Thoughts, feelings, and sensations. How we tend not to pay attention to them, but rather do things out there to fix them, to feel better when we're feeling agitated, and how mindfulness is really a turning in and noticing the thoughts, feelings, and sensations as a way to attend to ourselves, to take the choppy waters of the mind and body and find ourselves on the shore, where the waters may stay choppy, but we're in a different relationship to them. We have more to offer in that moment. And by bringing our attention to the thoughts, feelings, and sensations, when we move into the sensations, we move into the breath. And we pay attention to the breath for a few moments. And then as we move into listen, we expand our awareness from the breath to the body to sound. And we listen as if with ears that are hearing for the first time, just open to whatever arises, near or far, changes, moves on. We're just there noticing it. It's that practice of just is. Allowing the moment, allowing the sounds that arise to be what just is. Because sometimes there'll be somebody talking, and they'll be saying something. You don't want to hear what they're saying, even though it might be very important to hear what they're saying and to notice how they're saying it and articulating it and their relationship to it. That could be the most important part of that moment. But because we don't want to hear it, we start resisting. And then we start missing data, missing information, missing opportunities. So we practice just noticing sound as something that's just arising, so that in those moments that are more agitating, less desirable, we might carry a little bit of that quality of being interested and curious and just noticing there as well. Stop, look, and listen. And so we took away a handout that reminded us of the sitting practice, of stop, look, and listen, and also of a very short practice we can do at any time, of stop, where we stop or pause, whatever it is that we might be doing. And that can happen even in the midst of a conversation where you're just listening to somebody, but you're relating to that moment differently. You're pausing, taking a breath, T, with awareness of breathing. So stop, take a breath. That awareness of the breath is key. The breath is helpful, but it's the awareness that we're bringing into that moment. That's the mindfulness practice. To observe, to look around you, to notice, or to notice inward, and then to proceed. and then to proceed. And so the card is a reminder of those 3 practices, and then for this week and for next week, to note, what practice did you do? So each day, might you do a practice? Might you find 5 minutes or 10 minutes in the morning, or before or after lunch, or toward the end of the day, something that you feel will work. You can create the space. Sometimes it might mean waking up 5 or 10 minutes early so that you bring that opportunity into your day as opposed to trying to fit it in to a day that's already packed, if you will. But to note, what practice did you do? It might have been stop. It might have been a 5-minute sitting. It might have been this just as home, stop, look, and listen. It might have been a 10-minute sitting. Whatever it was, and these are things you can choose. It might have been the counting. I sat, I paid attention to my breath, and I noticed from 1 to 10, each of the next 10 breaths. And what you experienced during that. Did you get up to 120 before you realized that you weren't even paying attention? Were you unable to get beyond 2 or 3 because off your mind went? Did you make your way through, but you were aware of the clouds of the thought passing through the mind? What was your experience? That can be the practice too. And so you note the practice you did, you note the length of time. Time isn't so important as much as it's just noticing. So upon reflection, we can learn from that. And then your observations, taking a few moments to really notice, what did you observe in that setting? So that over the course of the next 2 weeks, you're able to practice this mindfulness as an experiential form that you bring into your day to find the ways in which it enriches or changes or offers you something to your day, the insight that may flow, and to have, when we meet in 2 weeks, you have some practice under your belt that can inform our next conversation. So I'm looking very much forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Along the way, if you have questions, please email me or text me or call me and ask your question. If I'll perhaps offer that as something to everybody as a response to the question, because the question you have is probably something that's on somebody else's mind. So wishing you all the best. Thank you very much for making your way to the University of Miami this morning. And I hope you have a terrific day and a terrific week until we see each other again.